Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone, and we are back from a little bit of a long break for Wuxia weekend. And we're also coming on Saturday rather than Friday, which is our normal time. Today we're going to be talking about the movie The Bastard Swordsman. This is by Liu Chun-Ku, who also directed films like Holy Flame of the Martial World, which I'm a big fan of, but also Lover's Blades, which we just talked about between me and Dion a few weeks back, among a number of other very good films. One of my personal favorites is The Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead. But yeah, so The Bastard Swordsman, I would file this under gonzo wuxia for sure. It's got that sort of candy-colored early 80s Shaw Brothers, super fantastic wuxia feel to it. And it stars Norman Chu in a very interesting role as Yunfei Yang, who's this orphaned. He's not quite a hero when we first meet him, but he's an orphaned disciple, or not even a disciple, a servant at Wudang, and he's bullied by all of the other Wudang disciples, and the master isn't teaching him anything. But we find out later he's secretly being taught by somebody in a mask at night and learning all these great skills. And it's just it's just kind of like a fairly simple plot about this ongoing feud between Wudang and the Invincible Clan, and the leader of Invincible Clan, who we'll get into this later maybe, has his reasons for having enmity against Wudang. Every 10 years is facing off against the master and defeating him. But then this other guy steps in. What was his name? Fu Yu Shu, right?
Yes.
Played by Lau Wing, who is also the really smarmy master in Human Lanterns that we both loved.
Yes.
And he almost plays kind of the same character here, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was glad to see him show up in this. This was a really enjoyable movie. The whole, when I saw the movie, it was 1983. I was like, oh, I hope this is one of those gonzo, lots of effects, kind of over the top martial arts movies, and oh yeah, totally, it delivered on that. I got it. It's a good film. It's not as crazy as something like Buddha's Palm or something, but it's still going in that direction.
Yeah, and it's not as crazy as Holy Flame in the Martial World, though it does have a lot of the same actors. But this feels like a little bit more grounded because it's all set at Wudang. It's like they don't really move around that much, so you don't get in a lot of these movies that have this sort of vibe to them. Part of what makes them so thrilling is going from location to location and set to set. And this one feels like, I don't know, maybe it was done on more of a budget in terms of locations, or maybe they just didn't have as much access to the different studios for whatever reason. But
yeah, the sets were pretty simple, you're right.
Yeah, they were simple, and it was one place. It was like this place and Invincible Clan and then the forest. And I think that was...
and there was the stock inn that, was probably the same inn they've used in 100 movies.
And the abandoned temple. And the abandoned temple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought this was a really enjoyable film. I had seen it before. I think I may have talked about it on the podcast, just on my own. But I really liked the whole silk thread thing. I liked the effects in this movie. I thought that it had really good effects, and I liked the sort of human drama of the characters. I liked the setup of the Norman Chu character. I thought Norman Chu did a really good job of playing this, because Norman Chu is sort of physically imposing. He's got like a big physique, and I liked how he used it. Like his arms were the thing that really made him awkward. Do you know what I mean? Like it was great body language in this. He definitely managed to carry that air of kind of patheticness, even though he is a pretty hulking guy. But yeah, no, I was really glad. I think Dion recommended we review it. Well, you had a list, and she was like, "Oh, you guys should do this one." And so if she's listening, thank you. That was a good pick. I because
really enjoyed it.
We were supposed to do Flying Swords of Dragon Gate at one point, and that got swapped around, and then I got my days confused, and so we realized last minute we had to do one that both me and Adam could watch, which basically meant we had to pick something right away off Amazon Prime. And so this ended up being a good choice, I think.
Yeah.
again, it has sword in the title, so we're still within the parameters of our theme.
Yes, we have not gone off script, and yeah, but no, it's a good plot too. I mean, it's the at core, it's a fairly simple plot. There's a lot of like twists throughout it that keep occurring, like what Fu Yushu's real agenda is, and the secret training that Yun Fei Yang is getting, and you just kind of keep getting all these layers that keep getting. It comes at a nice pace. Like the movie never gets confusing, but it keeps kind of every 10 minutes or so, there's some new element that kind of gets thrown into the mix.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes that work is the fact that they really do stick around at this one location, and that kind of, I could see it getting more confusing if there was a lot of other stuff going on, like they're going from point A to point B, and you're tracking all of these places in your mind. But all you have to really keep track of is the human drama, and it's like the, like you said, the layers, like right down to the manual that has another manual hidden inside of it. Like all these little details, and then and then like the backstory we get this great backstory when he his so spoilers, his secret master dies and gives him a jade heirloom that he has to go bring to Invincible Clan, and he has to bring it to what was the woman's name, the woman at the Invincible Clan,
the one he had to
Shenman, I'm going to mispronounce this, Shenman Jun, I think was her name.
Yes, that's correct.
And he had to bring that to her, and then she told him the backstory about how, which I thought was interesting. So the big villain in this is Dugu Wudi, who's just kind of like a typical martial badass that just wants to be the best, basically. That's pretty much what his deal is.
Well, at least that's what we think at the beginning. Yeah. There's another layer there, as with everything in this movie. So
he learns something that they call in the movie fatal skill. Or fatal technique, or something like that, and he's and the whole thing that we're trying to the big question before he has a duel is what level he's gotten to with the technique. And this is something you see in a lot of these movies. The characters, they'll have a technique and they'll get to certain levels of that technique. And so the master of Wudang, he's confident that if Wudi gets to 6 or 7, he's going to be fine. But what he doesn't realize is Wudi's gotten to 8. And Wudi,
actually, it was 8. You're right.
Yeah. But what we find out in the backstory is that his wife, Shen Manjun, is upset because it sounds like the training in this fatal technique has made him impotent, or it's sapped. She says it sapped his like vital manly energies or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrasing. But I think it basically, at the very least, it reduced his sexual appetite. So she was vindictive against him over that. And so her way of getting back at him was to rescue all the people that he wanted to kill. And one of the people he wanted to kill was the master of Wudang sect. So she takes him in, and she's also drinking heavily because she's so upset at the husband. And she has this affair with the master of Wudang sect. And so the daughter of the Invincible Clan, who we believe up until this point in the movie to be the daughter of Dugu Wudi, turns out to really be the daughter of the of the Wudang master because of that affair.
And of course that reveals too that we find out late in the movie that you have to be a virgin to really master the silkworm technique, which explains why Ching, the leader of Wudang, that Ching Song, why he never actually mastered it, is because he was not really as pure as he was claiming to be.
Yeah, and there's a really peculiar scene in this movie where the Norman Chu character, he's obviously a virgin. He's going to master this technique, but he gets injured beforehand, and so the Shen Manjun character, she gives him some of her energy, and then she reveals that she was given the manual by the Wudang master, and that she understood how to bring his abilities to the right level, and to sort of break through that threshold that other people couldn't. And it required bringing basically he needed 3 sources of yin energy, is what it sounded like.
Yeah, from 3 women. And so, and they just happened to be 3 women in the room, so everything works out perfectly.
And so I thought, so in a lot of these movies, you get these interesting sort of mystical uses of Taoism, and I just kind of think that worked really well here, where
it did. Yeah. It was a really good sequence. The whole cocoon sequence he goes into. I love stuff like that in these movies. And of course, then we have the whole, Fu Yu Shu's minions, the lightning, rain, wind, and thunder, who are a whole nother colorful element going on in the movie. There's just always something entertaining going on in this one.
Well, what I liked about that too is they really had that stark appearance to them. Like his minions all have white hair and funny eyebrows, and they're all again. I think this is something people don't realize about wuxia, because a lot of you sort of see it if you saw a movie like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon or something a little bit, but I think that movie's subdued enough that you can really miss just how eccentric so many of the characters tend to be in the genre. And this is a movie that really fully commits to the idea of this martial world filled with really eccentric and colorful characters. And so with the Fu Yu Shu character, he's eccentric in terms of his personality, but his minions are sort of this delightful visual presence. And,
they're verging into superhero territory with the way they dress.
And what I liked about him was he felt like a slightly more humanized Master Leung from Human Lanterns in this one. He had all of those other qualities, like he's secretly trying to take over the sect, but he has a good reason. It's to get revenge for his grandfather, who had tried to steal the manual before and was killed by Wudang. And so it's a legitimate grudge. Do you know what I mean? He's sort of fulfilling his duty to his grandfather there. But he kind of loses sight of the mission when he meets what's her name, Lun Wan played by Leanne Lau, who's a really good actress in these movies.
She is.
She was in Holy Flame in the Martial World. She played a white-haired old leader of one of the sects, and did a tremendous job with it. And I think here she really does a good job as she's sort of the love interest, but she's also she on the one hand she's the most supportive person towards Yun Fei Yang. On the other hand, she's the person who sort of becomes antagonistic towards him when she falls in love with Fu Yu Shu. It's a complicated relationship there for sure. But what I thought was interesting about that relationship is how Fu Yu Shu, he loses sight of his mission, and kind of it feels like he's actually, legitimately falling in love with her too, maybe. Because he's merciful towards her. He lets her go, and he kind of starts making mistakes around that time. Yeah, it's interesting because the characters in this movie all have, they have very grounded motivations. Like you say, Fu Yu Shu, his motivation is revenge. But he's kind of got, like you say, he has a righteous purpose, but at the same time, he goes about it in the most underhanded way possible, which kind of taints it. It's like, so it does kind of put him in the villain role properly, even though he has, you understand why he's doing it, but it's hard to justify the ends he went to in doing it. And then of course it's mixed, because on the one hand, he just wants to get revenge, but he's also awfully interested in learning that silkworm technique, which is a purely selfish motivation. But I love the whole setup. He basically, the way he gets them to trust him is Invincible Sect, the Wudi, the leader of Invincible Sect, says we're going to meet again in 2 years and fight after this duel, because he defeats the master of Wudang, Ching Song, right, was his name?
Yes.
He defeats Ching Song, and he tells them that we're going to meet again in 2 years, and they agree not to have any kind of battle between then. And then we see a scene where the Invincible Clan leader says, I hope all my disciples will behave for the next 2 years so I can go in seclusion and train. And then the next moment they're at an inn, and these people attack Chin Song, and claiming, apparently from Invincible Clan. And in the process, this Fu Yushu character, who just seems to be this wandering scholar swordsman, steps in and helps. But then his mother and his sister are killed. So you're like, well, that obviously wasn't a setup. There's, he's clearly, deserving of being brought into Wudang sect and initiated, which is what they do. But then we find out later that the woman that he said was his mother and his sister were actually just two prostitutes that he hired to pretend to die.
Yeah, the whole deception with the battle at the end was handled very well. I thought because there's a little bit of time. It gives you just enough time in the movie where you can think that, oh, Fu Yushu is this genuinely good guy who just jumped in and helped, and something tragic happened, and and that it doesn't go too long with that. But
this was my second time seeing the movie, and I was still surprised. They still fooled me in that scene.
Yeah, no, because they play it straight. He comes off as this heroic, noble figure who, oh, you're bullying this guy. I'm going to step in and help you out. Which is a perfectly wuxia thing to do.
It had been long enough since my last viewing that I didn't really remember where his character went. Do you know what I mean? I had like vague sense of where everything was going to go, but I couldn't really remember. And so I think that's a sign of doing it well, because I think if they had done it poorly on the second time around, you would definitely pick up on it. But yeah, so I thought that part was handled really well too. I also thought that the whole movie to me is a very gameable film. I feel like the techniques, the rules for the techniques, and just the two clans, like you could easily spin an adventure out of this, I thought.
Yeah, well, it's the structure of this movie, it kind of mutates as it goes. It's very free flowing. Because, I mean, initially it starts with the head of these two sects kind of having their rivalry. By the end of the movie, that's all drifted off, and it's into this big fight between Yun Fei Yang and Fu Yushu, which is, not where we started at all. And it's like, it's the way if you've got a really good role-playing campaign, just these, the events are just kind of emerging out of what's going on in the world, and that's a very good gameable thing, in my opinion. You've just got there's just a lot of hooks that people can get involved in.
And the silkworm technique itself was just so fun on camera. It's not exactly clear 100% what it does, but it's like
it doesn't need to be.
But he cocoons himself. Like he literally cocoons. Then he turns into a white-haired master, basically, by the time he's done, and he's able to weave all these threads against his enemies. And it's like he's basically throwing chi infused silk at people is what it looks like.
Yeah, it's very, very Spider-Man-ish technique at some points. But the fight scenes in this are very good. Going back to the first duel where they had the 10-year duel at the beginning. Just from that point in the movie, I was just like, yeah, this is really great. I was thoroughly on board with the movie for every second past that point.
Yeah, the fight scenes were well done, I thought. They were really well. They were well shot. They were well performed and well choreographed, and they didn't really disappoint. And also, we're forgetting to mention a very important thing. Lo Meng is in this too. He plays Kun Sun Wang, who's another member of Invincible Clan. He's the one that shows up very early on to deliver. There's a scene which is pretty amusing when Lo Meng's character shows up at Wudang to deliver a gift to the master of Wudang, basically announcing that the duel date has arrived, and the gift is a woman's wrap robe, I think, or some kind of blouse or something like that. And he says, my master doesn't think you're going to show up, so this is so you can put this on and just flee the martial world. I forget exactly what he said, but it was
yeah, I love the classic early insulting gift scene in a movie. That's always good. Going back to Shakespeare's Henry V with the tennis balls, it's just a classic trope that always works.
Well, and I like when there's like that degree of politeness involved, so that's like it's not exactly clear how hostile this is until
until you open the gift. You're like, oh.
But Lo Meng, I mean, obviously Lo Meng is a, he's going to be good, but they used him well early on, so it really, that was, I think his fight scene is the first one, so that really establishes the quality of the film from right out of the gate. And also the humor in this movie.
You're right. I said the duel scene was where I went over. That was the scene that won me over. That scene was great.
And it's a great scene where it's just one of these scenes where like the person is fighting their way into the temple type of a thing. It's a
It's good too, because the whole thing of him refusing to put his sword away, and then the scene ends with Ching Song just taking his sword away at the end to be like, oh, and by the way,
Yeah.
It's it seems like he's totally gotten away with disrespecting their traditions, but it's like, oh, this Ching Song's a little tougher than we were thinking.
And but I liked that Wudong here, they're not all that sympathetic in a lot of ways. Like, you really don't like Wudong because at the beginning of the movie they're using Norman Chu's character as target practice. Basically, they have him put on some kind of metal armor and have him hold all these targets so that they can throw darts and daggers or something. I think it was daggers at a moving target, and they're just bullying him and being mean to him. And then there are these two, I think they call them the Keepers of the Law or the Keepers of Brothers of Justice, but they're these two guys that they always go to whenever there's trouble. They're the elders that you have to basically bring any grievances to. And they're just so slimy and shady, and they're always taking the side of the naughty pupils. But then when things really get bad and Fu Yu Shu tries to take over, like half of Wudong's sect defects to him.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot in this movie of Quan Zhang's sect in Return of Condor Heroes, where it's like, okay, it's this greatly respected order that's just started to rot from the inside.
It's very much in the style of that, and I think and then of course some of the other ones do commit suicide, so they sort of preserve a degree of honor, but they're a pretty small minority of the student body, I think, there. And and that's actually the scene where Lun Wan-ar is protected by Fu Yu Shu, who stops her from committing suicide.
Which was his fatal error.
but I thought it was a really fabulous movie, and it's one I always recommend to people just because it's like you said, there's a certain style of wuxia that comes out in the mid and early 80s that's really gonzo and just has a certain vibe and color to it, and this is part of that movement of movies. Mm-hmm. But it's also one that I think it presents itself as a more normal film at first, so you're not like Holy Flame in the Martial World. Right away, you're in like this zany universe that most martial arts movies don't reside in. And in this one, you start out in a normal martial arts universe, and it gets progressively more into that territory. But it doesn't. It only gets really crazy like in the final sections of the movie when you have the actual silken thread technique being used. And a few other areas too, like there's a scene where the guy's floating around in the chair and attacking, and things like that too. But
there's scenes that are way out there in that mid '80s vibe. But I'd say 80% of the movie, the scene would be at home in any late '70s Shaw Brothers movie from that era.
So it's an interesting balance, I think. It creates an interesting balance because it's got the gonzo stuff, but you still have to take it kind of more seriously. Like a lot of the more gonzo films, it's crazy the whole way through, and so you're just sort of anticipating, well, what's the next crazy thing I'm going to see? And this isn't like that. This is like you'll get some crazy stuff, but it's mixed in with a lot of real sort of serious character development and fight scenes and also they don't go for a lot of humor in the fights themselves. The fights tend to be played pretty straight as well. So they don't do this thing that, like in Holy Flame in the Martial World, there's a lot of reverse crank where the fight scenes are like ridiculously sped up, and they don't do that here. They don't do any of that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a real enjoyable movie. And I think I think it's on Prime right now too, so we definitely would tell people that they should go check it out. And if they're going to check out this one, I think they should check out films like Holy Flame in the Martial World, Buddha's Palm, all, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you're inclined, check out I think it's Journey of the Doomed, which is also in that zone, but it's one I might not recommend as highly. Battle Wizard is another one that's kind of in that zone, but again, I wouldn't recommend it quite as highly. But if you like Candy Colored and you like Gonzo, this is a wuxia film for you.
Yeah, this is a good one to introduce people to I think to an extent, because it is very. I would I would have loved this even before I got into wuxia.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to be into wuxia to enjoy a movie like this. I think this one is entertaining, even if you don't know that much about the genre. It might even be a good introduction to the genre for some people, because it kind of gives you an indication of just how far the genre can go in certain directions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of pondering in my mind whether, like the typical route for people to learn about wuxia, I guess like the standard would be like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Hero, or one of the big movies that made it over here, somewhat recently. And a movie like this, though, I don't know. Maybe it would be interesting if, because I think something that happens when people watch Crouching Tiger or Hero is that comes from a time when wuxia movies were like extremely serious. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, for me, that was the first one I really saw. I got into wuxia very late, and it's like I went and saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in the theater, and I liked it, but it was a very serious movie. And when I started watching these movies with you, I mean, Web of Death was, I think, the second movie I watched, and I was like, wow, these movies can be really just nonstop crazy fun. I mean, Web of Death is in it. It's an earlier movie, but it's kind of a precursor of his 80s style of just having really, really gonzo stuff going on. And so I think it's good to give people a sense of how fun wuxia can be early on.
No, and I think that's the thing. That's because, and again, I mean, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a good movie. I'm not criticizing at all.
No, it's a good one. But I just got a false impression of the genre.
Because I think if you watch Hero and Crouching Tiger and movies like that as your first viewing, you could be misled to think that it's always going to be paced like that, that there's always the danger of it getting boring. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like that kind of a thing. But so much of wuxia is just fun stuff. Not all of it. I mean, there's a lot of very serious wuxia from the 70s.
Sure.
that's dry and stuff like that too. But but so much of it, especially this period and like the 90s period, is just it's like there was a dose of adrenaline shot into the movie. Do you know what I mean? There's just something going on where you can tell people they're either desperate or really enthused about what they're doing, and it leads to all kinds of interesting decisions.
Yeah, and I think another place where Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon gives you a weird sense is that, if I recall, that's a pretty long movie. And it's like most wuxia movies are like in the hour-and-a-half range. They're just packed with plot. It's just like, boom. They have to almost move quickly to get the whole story in, which...
that does often depend on which version you're watching, because there are sometimes different cuts. Yeah. But but most of the Shaw Brothers movies that you get now, they'll be like an hour and 30 minutes. And a good chunk of the 90s ones too. But I think that even when they are longer, they just feel different. They don't and I understand why. Like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was trying to show you how beautiful wuxia can be. Do you know what I mean? It was trying to sort of direct your eyes on it and say, look, this is how graceful wuxia is. And you might not see this if you go and you watch a wuxia movie for the first time. Like if you see even The Bride with White Hair or Swordsman 2, which are outstanding wuxia films, if you see those the very first time, they might look a little zany to the eye, just because everything's so rapid and you don't necessarily understand the physics of what's going on. So I feel like what Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon did was it really took a much slower approach to present it to a Western audience in a way that would emphasize the graceful beauty of it. And then after that, when you go and you watch Swordsman 2, you sort of see, you see it more clearly, maybe, is the idea. But I think there's the other side of it is that you maybe go in with this expectation that it's all serious. And
yeah, I think the key is there is no one movie you can watch and understand what wuxia is like. You need to watch at least 3, maybe 4 before you're like, okay, now I understand the range that's going on here.
Yeah, because there really is tremendous range. There really is, and I mean, and there's also tremendous change over time. If you go back and you watch the movies from the late 60s, they look so different from the movies in the late 70s and then the 80s and the 90s. So
it's like watching a Western and deciding that's what Westerns are like. Cause,
that's a good comparison. That's a very good comparison, because there really are different kinds of Westerns and there are different kinds of wuxia movies. And this is one of them, and this is a good example of the gonzo and the sect feud driven wuxia movies, which I think are the best. I think one of the things I like about wuxia is that it gets a little bit similar to our gangster movies. Do you know what I mean? It gets sort of like gang conflict of some kind. You know, obviously sects sometimes tend to be more righteous, but as we see in this film, there's a lot of very non-righteous people in the martial world, and so you know, I think it's something that I know Americans can understand that sort of style well, that sort of gang war. You know, it's a really useful environment for creating interesting stories.
Yeah, well, talking about gameable stories, I mean, that's the faction thing is what makes a lot of wuxia stories really gameable, because having multiple factions where the players can choose between the factions on their own, who they're going to make enemies with, who they're going to work with, is always a great setup, and wuxia gives you that a lot.
And I think another thing that makes wuxia so gameable is the fact that it doesn't really, like, wuxia's not committed to this idea that, like, okay, at least in the films and in a lot of the books, this character has to make this decision by this point so that everything goes in this direction. You can totally have somebody switch sides or have a sect get extinguished, and then, you know, and you can have a guy who maybe looks like he's supposed to be the hero die midway through, and then other people pick up the story for him. You know, there's all kinds of things that frequently happen in these movies that make you more comfortable allowing them in a game. And so so in a sect war situation like this, I don't know who the player characters would necessarily be. You know, they might be Norman Chu, but maybe they're Lau Wing. Do you know what I mean? Like Fu Yu Shu. I've had a number of player characters that did things like him. And so you know, there's a lot of adaptability in the genre, because the feuds, all that matters is the feuds going on. It doesn't matter where they go necessarily. You know, and so, you know, if somebody decides to switch sides at the last minute, that's still interesting, and so therefore it's still valid. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're not in the automatic good versus evil paradigm all the time, so it gives you more flexibility.
Well, and what's another cool thing about it is, I mean, they do have this baked-in idea of orthodox and unorthodox sects, and there usually are good and evil clans, but, like, even within that, there's so much wiggle room for, well, this clan's evil, but only because people have thought they were evil for so long, and so really
there's this one virtuous guy in the clan, and then vice versa, and so there's tons of wiggle room, you know, and you have the situation where people from two different sects come together and are pitted against both their sects, and there's so much flexibility.
And it's and I guess they kind of glossed over a really crucial detail too in this one. I think it was a detail that was mirrored in Holy Flame in the Martial World, but I'd have to watch it again to remember. But the Yun Fei Yang and Dugu Fang the daughter of the Invincible clan, they're brother and sister, right? Like, according to that backstory. But they never dwell on that at all. At least I don't think they did. I don't remember them really
Well,
saying,
that's the thing. It's like it's clear that it's not made clear who the mother of Yun Fei-yang is. Or who, I mean, if it was he, I don't know. I was very confused.
no, it was
about
another. The mother was a woman surnamed Yoon, so we know it was a different.
We do know it was one. Okay, but yeah, which is interesting because then that raised the fact that Ching Song had two affairs.
Yeah, he's a very prolific man. Well, here's what's really funny about that, right? Because when Fu Yu-shu takes on the mantle of leadership at Wudang, the first thing they say to him is, "Are you prepared to relinquish all earthly attachments?" And that's instantly when Lun Wan gets upset because she realizes she won't be able to have him as her husband because he can't have love in his life, and so that must mean that Ching Song is like the worst leader of Wudang ever, at least in that one crucial respect, because or they suddenly implemented that rule for that reason without really getting into the details of it.
But no, it definitely it is interesting that Ching Song is this I mean it kind of explains a lot about the state the sect is in to an extent.
I would agree with that for sure. That's there's no argument from me on that front. But yeah, so I don't know. I think it was weird though that they kind of glossed over that, and but I really did like the I love the technique with the 3 yin energy because that to me seems so gameable. Like that's something where I instantly see it and I'm like, okay, I want to make mechanics for that. That seems like fun. And again, I love when they have like, 20 years ago this happened, and they sort of reveal all these details that become relevant. It's kind of a trope in the genre, but it's always like 10 or 20 years it seems, but it works really well.
Yeah, it's always basically one generation ago this happened, which is the perfect length.
Well, I think the thing I like about it is it sort of says, hey, like life kind of keeps going in this martial world. Like this is like we were young once too. And this is what happened to us, and now this is what's happening to you, and it's kind of that sort of a thing. It's very cyclical.
I mean, yeah. One thing I really loved about wuxia when I first started really getting into it is the way almost every really good wuxia movie feels like you're coming in halfway through the story. It's like it's not this contained thing. It's like you're just getting a chapter of this story taking place in this really large world, which is great.
And yeah, so again, we're gonna head out now because we have another podcast to record. Actually, we're doing our Doctor Who podcast as well.
Busy schedule.
But again, it's Bastard Swordsman, and it's directed by Liu Chun-Ku, who's done a number of great movies. He's not quite as well known, I think, but like I find whenever I see his films, they tend to be solid. In fact, we did Lover's Blades, and I don't think I even recognized him. I don't think I made the connection. Oh, it's the guy who did Holy Flame in the Martial World and all these other movies I like. But looking at his list of films on Hong Kong Movie Database, definitely, I'm definitely finding that I like this guy's films. And so I guess we'll head out, and I don't know what movie we're going to have next week. It might be Flying Swords of Dragon Gate, hopefully. I've already watched it twice in anticipation of recording discussions of it, and we had to cancel for a variety of reasons. But I don't mind watching it again. It's an enjoyable enough movie. And I know we're going to be doing Butterfly and Sword as well, and some other films. And we're basically, because we had sort of an odd schedule, I think what we might end up doing is kind of doing a month and a half of movies with swords in the title, which is probably okay given the theme is so it's apparently like the easiest theme to fill up our roster with that we've ever had.
I remember when I called up the movie on Prime to watch this movie, the entire recommendations thing was wuxia movies with swords in the title was every single recommended movie.
Apparently it's a very common thing. So we'll let you go, and we'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll have a full crew, and we'll be able to talk about Flying Swords of Dragon Gate. So until then, we will talk to you later.